So obviously there was a lot going on in Russia over the last 4 days or so. It really looked like there might be fighting in the streets of Moscow, but it was averted. That said, how did we get to the point where this historic event nearly happened? Well, the leader of the mercenary group Wagner, which you've probably heard a lot about over the last year when it comes to the war in Ukraine. This is Yevgeny Prigozhin, led his forces initially to the Russian city of Rostov-on-Don, which is obviously very close to Ukraine. It's one of the military sort of staging grounds for Wagner Group, but for the military more generally in its invasion into Ukraine, and took it over with little resistance. It doesn't seem like there was much fighting there. From that, he then dispatched his forces to march on Moscow, which is hundreds of miles away, but they began to do that. And they got to within 125 miles from the Russian capital, with many people believing that they are going to make it to Moscow. There's going to be fighting in the streets, and there wasn't much done to stop them along the way. There are reports of perhaps the downings of a few Russian military helicopters, but other than that, Russia seemed completely taken aback by what was going on and didn't seem to have like the capacity or the plans or the will to actually counter it. They did not meet the Wagner Group halfway to Moscow with 50,000 soldiers or anything like that, but it did end. It sort of was diffused as a result of, at least publicly, what we are led to believe is a deal that was reached between Vladimir Putin, his, the government, and Prigozhin. So according to a Kremlin spokesman, the criminal case that had been opened against the leader of Wagner was for armed mutiny is dropped. Wagner fighters who had taken part in his quote march for justice will not face any actions. They haven't made clear any other concessions that have been made, although one of the main things that he had been asking for was for several of the senior members of the Russian government, including the defense secretary, to be taken out of that position. Will that actually happen? We don't know. But supposedly he's going for Belarus. His soldiers are going to be integrated into the Russian military. And that was actually part of what seems to have set off the minor rebellion, was this plan to do that. If I was one of his soldiers, Francesca, I will say I would be a little bit worried about what's gonna happen going forward. It's very easy for them to say to stop an incipient rebellion that they're just going to integrate you in or whatever, but will they? Will they just forgive and forget? I mean, it's not like there's a leader of the mercenary group and then just regular soldiers. There's also, there's lieutenants and things like that along the way. What will happen to them? And supposedly there had been threats against his family as well. So I don't know, the entire thing's really dirty, obviously. I don't know what would have happened if it had come to fighting in Moscow, but what do you think about all this?
Well, and apparently, according to reports, like the citizens, as they were approaching Moscow, were welcoming them in. I mean, I think, so that's something to factor into all of this, but I don't know who has the upper hand here, right? It looks like Moscow was fairly unprotected, and it looks like, just as I think we've all suspected, Putin's grasp on his leadership and authority is waning and slipping, and he relied on the Wagner Group in large part, and the fact that they're turning on him is a really, really bad look for everything, right? It shows you look weak and that you don't have the support of the people. That's number one. But the fact that the other way it makes Putin look weak is the fact that there was a negotiation at all. It wasn't, no, you're dead immediately, goodbye. Now, the real thing is, maybe it's a no, we'll negotiate now, and you're gonna be dead in a little bit. So who knows who has the upper hand? Who knows what's actually going on? I think it is really suspicious that there was this negotiation. Yes, maybe Putin did have the upper hand for Prigozhin to even leave. Maybe there's some sort of promise of him coming back into the fold. Who knows? I don't know. All I know is apparently his army is full of former criminals who were let out of prison in order to serve with his. So these are scary ass dudes. So I don't know, and there's still an element within the Russian military. Will they use that against Ukrainians? Will they use that against Russians themselves? Both feel bad at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing's super weird. I mean, look, obviously there's a lot of anger at the Russian government because of this horrendous, barbaric war that they've been waging. That said, just Putin his government being taken down by just anyone doesn't necessarily result in a better situation for the Russian people. It would probably result in a better situation for the Ukrainians, but it's not just a situation where any sort of chaos is good because the Russian government is bad. It's obviously much more complicated than that. A lot of open questions still haven't been answered. He had said that the Russian military attacked the mercenary troops. That's one of the things that triggered this. There's no actual evidence of that that's been presented, but that's what he said. And he has been a very outspoken critic of the preparedness and supplies for troops in Ukraine, as well as the tactics of the military leadership of Russia. I think a lot of people think that he's fairly like spot on in those criticisms. So will that be part of the deal? Is that they actually start to seem to give a damn about the soldiers that are dying in Ukraine? I don't know. The whole thing is just crazy. Like the fact that they did not. You have a military of hundreds of thousands of men. You have an air force, and they appeared to have barely tried to fight back against this force as it was marching on them. Wow. Maybe they were waiting because they knew that if they attack them, then there's no negotiation. It's obviously complex, but it just does not look good. And you should be able to, like, imagine you're rolling down I-95 or whatever, and just nothing happens for 200 miles. That seems weird, man. Anyway, that's my final thoughts. Any other thoughts from you?
I mean, I just compare it to American Mercenaries and thinking like, okay, American Mercenaries usually do it for the money. Leaders usually do it for the money. Eric Prince, this would be the equivalent of Eric Prince trying to like march on the Capitol. Which like probably Eric Prince's relatives were in January 6th, but that's like neither here nor there. But like, imagine how crazy that is. That's like this, I'm not in it for the money. You're doing this war wrong. I've been on the ground. Let me, let me take over.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.